Hello and welcome to the first episode of Dunya Rising. I am your host Dunya and I live in Glastonbury. I'm a DJ, a sound healer, a creative, an activist and a lover of podcasts. In this podcast series, we'll be exploring spirituality, well-being and creativity. I want to share all the conversations I've had with really inspiring souls who are sharing their gifts with the world so that we can heal, step into our power and find what brings us joy. In this episode, I had the privilege of interviewing Cara Wheatley McGrain, an educator, coach who is the founder of The Mindful Gut and author of Calm Your Gut, a mindful and compassionate guide to healing IBD and IBS. 1 in 5 people in the UK are living with a chronic gut condition like myself, and I think this is why this episode is so personally important to me, because I have Crohn's disease and I've always found myself feeling quite disempowered, not knowing what works and how to get to the root cause of these conditions. And my dearest sister Elfa is a guest host on this episode. Elfa is an intuitive, psychic, highly compassionate healer, coach and energy worker, also based in Glastonbury. And this series features the music of Starseed Soul, a really close friend and Bristol-born electronic music producer, DJ and pianist. Her music really elevates mind, body and soul, and the track featured in this series is called Indian Dub. So check out the links in the description for more information about her music and mixes. In this episode, Cara shares her story with gut health problems. She talks about food as medicine, what the microbiome is, the relationship between gut health and mental health, the importance of compassion, the role of the energetic body, movement and dance for healing. She leads us through a short belly metta bhavana practice in the episode. And at the end, I'm so excited to share with you a full version of this belly metta bhavana practice in collaboration with Starseed Soul. So this will be fully released in the coming weeks, but we get to hear it played out here in this beautiful co-created track that really takes you on a journey. And here are some of my favourite quotes from the episode.
That authentic relationship and almost authority that we have over our own body, because often we give that away. When we get a label, especially a medical label, we kind of give away a certain amount of our bodily autonomy to the person who's given the label. I think when we create a little bit of space to listen, there's the opportunity maybe to hear in our bodies what we need. Our gut communicates to our brain, but our brain is also communicating to our gut. There is this deeper level of knowing that we experience in our lives, which is in our gut, and our gut is responding and kind of, I guess, shaping how we feel. And we often, because we're kind of, living neck upwards, we don't always connect to that and feel with that. I'm on my side. I'm with myself. Going back to literally touching our belly, touching our heart, I'm actually connected. So the yin of self-compassion is this idea of being tender and gentle and kind and soft and yielding. But the yang of self-compassion is actually about being strong. It's advocating for ourselves. It's articulating. It's setting boundaries. It's being like, no. Yes. And it's clarity. It's a ceremonial process. It's a really powerful process. And I think ceremony and ritual can be really supportive when we're healing. It can support us to stop, to be more aware, to be more present.
Cara, thank you so much for joining us for our podcast today. We've just been so excited to interview you.
I am so happy to be here. I'm really excited. It's so lovely gathering as women in this virtual space to have this conversation. So I'm really up for it. Yeah.
So we know that you're a coach, a meditation practitioner, an educational consultant, and an author. We both absolutely love your book as well. You've been living with gut problems from an early age. Can you just tell us a bit more about your story?
I'm really aware that every time we talk more openly about gut health, actually, it's really important for other people. It gives other people the permission to talk more openly about gut health. And so my story started really, I think, as the child who had a very bloated belly. I was an anxious child. I always seemed to have like a swollen belly, uncomfortable, difficulty digesting certain foods. As far back as I can remember, probably 6 or 7. And then I had the GP out a few times in my teens, couldn't quite work out what was going on, why I was having so many stomach pains. And then eventually I was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis when I was at university. And honestly, at that age, you get a diagnosis and you kind of take it on the chin. You kind of go, okay, what does that mean? I don't know, really. I didn't Google it, which is really strange. I just I didn't kind of go into that space. I just accepted it. But then I didn't really make significant changes. I quite soon after my diagnosis, a couple of years after my diagnosis, I got really ill really quickly. And I ended up in hospital and I was put on a drip, I was put on intravenous steroids, and the consultant took my mum aside because I was in such a state. I was so ill and said, if Cara doesn't respond to this intravenous steroids in the next 48 hours, we're going to have to operate to remove her colon. I was really thin. I'd lost a lot of weight. I was very weak. And that first night I was in hospital, I was so ill. I had an experience of really being out of my body. I felt disconnected from my body. I felt like I wasn't actually in my body. I felt like I was at a distance. I had a very strange experience in the night when the nurses were coming around going, her blood pressure's still really low. We need to give her another drip. And I remember that. And I remember feeling like I was at the side of myself, slightly above. I was in hospital for a few weeks. I was slowly weaned off the intravenous steroids. When I got home, I had to build myself back up, really. I was so thin, I was so emaciated, really malnourished, I guess you'd
Mhm.
say. I had basically been told I'd almost inevitably had to have surgery. I avoided it this time, but I would almost inevitably have surgery, and that I was on medication for the rest of my life. And that's tough to hear when you're in your 20s. That's a really tough thing to process. And actually, I was a bit stubborn. I was thinking, there must be something I've got a really strong gut instinct. There
Mm.
must be something I can do. And that's the start of my journey really with my gut health.
I really resonate with that as well because I think I told you before been living with Crohn's disease. And when you described that hospital experience, it kind of like it was reminding me of an experience I had as well, where it was this similar situation on the steroids on the drip, and pretty much the consultant saying you should be lucky that you're not having surgery at this point, and it was just that close. So I really thank you for sharing that story because I think a lot of people are, as you know, living with these gut health problems in the UK and especially a lot of young people nowadays. So where did your research take you? How did you get to the point of, writing the book, starting the Mindful Gut UK? How did it get to that point of deciding that you really wanted to sort of dedicate your life to supporting people with gut health problems?
Oh, that's such a powerful question. Thank you. I think for me, the first start of the journey was I had a really strong instinct that food mattered, that food had an impact. The choices of food that I was making were having an impact on how I felt, not just in my gut, but in my body and myself, my well-being. I started to become more intuitive when I was choosing food, particularly that first very serious episode of being hospitalized and coming out. I had a sense I needed to build myself back up. And so I would pick up food at home and I would just be, I need to eat this. I need to eat this avocado and these walnuts. I need to eat it. I was just like, felt the food was resonating, like literally like, oh, this is food that's making me feel better. I think our bodies want to be well. Our bodies want to be balanced. I think when we create a little bit of space to listen, there's the opportunity maybe to hear in our bodies what
Yeah,
we need.
Yes, that's really interesting.
absolutely.
Because you had a question about the food, didn't you? Like,
Yes, yes. You talk in your book about trigger foods, and then I thought this is really interesting. What are trigger foods? How can we avoid trigger foods?
mm,
How they affect our daily life? Can you talk about this a little bit?
It's quite a big question in a way because actually we know there are common trigger foods that actually many of us have a response to. And what's really interesting is we can get hung up on the foods, but a lot of it, in my experience, is actually about the way those foods are processed. We get hung up on wheat and gluten. That's a really common one. And actually, I'm not great with wheat and gluten. It's not my thing. I make my own bread. I use different flour. But what's really interesting is I spent a lot of time examining like gluten-free products and thinking, oh yeah, this is the solution. It's not got wheat. It's gluten-free. It must be okay. But actually, I started to realize this stuff isn't great. Some of this stuff is really highly processed. If you check the shelf life, it would be around for like years and still be edible. I was thinking, what's in this? What are we eating? There are very common kinds of trigger food. Wheat is a very common one. Dairy is quite a common one, certainly in the IBD community and IBS community. Those are two very common foods. And sometimes when people remove them, they feel, oh, I feel better. But what's actually happening is sometimes we're removing the highly processed foods from our diet and we're actually eating more natural food. So there's something to kind of be unraveled. And I think it's often very personal for the individual involved. And it might be that your body and your gut microbiome, your inner world of gut bacteria, are actually struggling with some of the very artificial foods, the artificial sweeteners, the emulsifiers, and the chemicals that are in that food more than a specific ingredient. There's a risk that we kind of simplify it and we go, it's, we get rid of this, we go gluten free, we go dairy free, and we kind of restrict and we restrict and we restrict.
Mhm.
And actually, I think that's something I feel quite passionate about is actually what we want to do ultimately is to be more diverse. We want to be eating a really wonderful, diverse diet of rich foods and nourishing ourselves and eating, I say real food, like food that is we can see tangibly where it's come
Cool.
from and
Yeah,
what the actual parts of it are that have come together.
I love that.
So
I feel like doing the detox, and Alpha's obviously had to coach me through it. I mean, psychologically, it is really difficult to keep saying no to yourself. And I was opening up to Alpha about the effect of saying no to certain food groups, especially when you're feeling emotional, you're feeling low, or you're, pre-period. So I found myself like saying no to this, but it meant that I was binge eating in order, or like really overeating to deal with it. Or if I wasn't binge eating, I was eating at such a speed. I really love that you talk about sort of building this intuitive relationship with food because so much of it does feel psychological when you're not actually hungry, but you're eating because you're bored or you're feeling sad. I feel like so often when we think about diets or gut health, everything can feel really strict and regimented. And living in a very stressful world, it's kind of hard to do that because a lot of us are eating food as a way of coping.
this is such an important space actually to talk about, I think, and maybe as women to talk about, because actually we get so many messages around what's right and what's wrong, what we should be and not, shouldn't be doing. There's a whole diet culture as well, isn't there? There's so much that's thrown at us from such a young age that it gets very cloudy. It gets very foggy. What's actually right? And I think the other thing is the more that I've gone on my own journey and have worked with other people, the more I realize we're so individual. Our biology, our gut microbiomes are unique. And we can have very different responses to the same food that other people might have, and even have different responses to the same food on a different day because just like you were saying, Donya, we eat it like too quickly, we eat it under pressure or stress or anxiety, and our body just shuts down. Like my digestive system and we've been working together to like grow our relationship over time. And I just noticed like I have quite a sensitive digestive system. My gut is quite sensitive. I'm just putting it out there. It is. And so if I'm really highly stressed, it wants to shut down. It doesn't want to digest. It doesn't want a big meal. It's like I have to work with it. I have to take a few breaths. I have to just arrive at the table. I have to just be a little bit more present with my plate
Mm,
before going, I'm just going to eat this whole meal now. This idea of opening up that intuitive, more caring relationship with our whole digestive system, I think is really important, particularly if we're living with a gut health issue. We almost have to like re-establish that relationship, like re-establish that partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what you say. It's being mindful
Mhm.
about
Mm.
your eating and your environment. And if you're feeling triggered, not going to the trigger food.
Yeah. Bread for me, chocolate,
Yeah,
yeah.
sugar.
Yeah. And also, it's difficult to be mindful in the world today where everything feels so
Overwhelming.
overwhelming,
Yes,
and it's really
absolutely.
hard to just I realized, having coaching with Alpha, my biggest struggle, it wasn't, the typical, when you get coaching of, I need to be motivated, I need to do. My struggle was actually being calm
Being
and sit
present.
and being present. I was like, I need coaching to learn how to just be still. And it does massively impact our diets. When you start getting these labels, you start to feel a bit disempowered. But I think reading your book and, speaking to Alpha, I've learned so much that we can live so well and healthily with gut problems.
A couple of things are really coming up to me as you say that is one about that authentic relationship and almost authority that we have over our own body, because often we give that away. When we get a label, especially a medical label, we kind of give away a certain amount of our bodily autonomy to the person who's given the label, who then tells us all the different things that now need to happen and the different tablets and procedures we need to have. And I I've got to say, as I say that, I have a huge respect for, Western medicine. It saved my life. I wouldn't be here having this conversation if I didn't have intravenous steroids at that point.
Yeah.
It completely saved my life. And there's a really important role in medication and treatment.
Mhm.
But I also think when we're talking about chronic conditions, the ability to step back and look at the big picture
Yeah.
and look at our relationship. I mean, Donny, you were just talking about that idea of speed, the idea of overwhelm and speed. And I hear you, we it's we live in we live in a world, don't we, where there's so much pressure to kind of race through everything, race through what we eat, race through our day, race through every aspect of our lives. And actually, some of us more than others might struggle with that because that's just not how our being needs us to be. Our digestive system in particular is so affected by that. And, we're in fight and flight mode all the time. It's completely not a space where you can digest food. There's a biology to it. It shuts down our digestive enzymes, our saliva stops, we get a dry mouth, like literally. So we're not starting that digestive process in the mouth. And then it shuts down the digestive enzymes in our stomach. It literally means our body's going, no, I'm not in food mode. I'm in, do I need to run away? How is there an emergency? How do I respond? I need to
Mm.
focus on safety. That's my priority. And that's a wonderful evolutionary device, that's been created in our bodies. But we're in that state for much of our waking life and feeling that, then there's a real issue with us being able to digest our food. And so the ability for us to drop into our parasympathetic mode and drop into that rest, digest, tend, and befriend mode by just noticing that we've been rushing around, by taking some breaths. It's that simple, just arriving, just being a bit more present. That's when we actually can start to think about, I'm actually quite hungry. I need to eat some food. I actually notice my hunger. I feel my hunger. And it's so simple. It's almost so simple that we miss it, but it's
Yeah.
profound.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's what I really appreciated about your book. I love that there are so many exercises with it because I think other books that I've found it's very scientific, and although I appreciate it, it's not really accessible for the mainstream. So sometimes, again, like having that label, Crohn's disease, chronic condition, for me, it just feels, oh, am I going to be ill forever? It just feels really disempowering to the point that I've actively avoided Googling it and going on
Mm.
websites for the fear of, I don't want to see those pictures. I don't want to look at that because then I'm the sick person and then I'm affirming that in my body, which means that I'll always be the sick person. I would just love to just have a bit more of a description about the microbiome, because I feel like this whole part of my
Yeah.
education was massively missed in
We
school.
didn't learn
We didn't learn
anything about
anything.
it in our school.
Not at all. And I feel this, I feel really naive that I've lived without this basic knowledge. So I was kind of reading the book. You were saying that the microbiome contains 70% of our immune system. The bacteria populating the gut, we've got about 4,000 species, which have a population of 100 trillion. And yet many of us don't, including hands up,
Yeah.
no
Well,
shame. I didn't really understand the microbiome
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. And I just want to also say, I think it's okay that we haven't heard about it because actually I think a lot of our biology teachers probably didn't know much about it. And I think what's been really fascinating is the research on the gut microbiome has exploded in the last decade, partly because going back to what you just quoted there, Donia, about 70% of our immune system being linked to our gut, actually we realized the health of the gut microbiome actually shapes our immune response. I really think it's going to change medical approaches over the next few decades. I would say the simple and really important thing to know about the gut microbiome is it changes over our lifetime, and that we have this amazing range of species, but all of us will be slightly different. It's a bit like our fingerprint, it will be slightly different, it will be slightly unique to us. And the things that can shape our gut microbiome are what we eat. So that's a really empowering thing. So our food, our foods that we eat regularly will change our gut microbiome. There are things that can have a negative impact on the gut microbiome. So antibiotics, and just by their nature, they actually kill bacteria. So they can kill, I mean, they can be life-saving, but they can also have a negative impact on our gut microbiome. So just to say, the way that we kind of measure the health of the gut microbiome is we look at the number of bacteria,
yeah.
we look at the diversity of bacteria. We want a really lovely diverse set of bacteria because that's like increases the resilience.
Mhm.
And sometimes when I talk about it and I'm kind of teaching in education, I talk about it a little bit. An analogy is like a garden. If you imagine you had a gut garden, like an inner gut garden, and you were looking, you were kind of the caretaker, you were cultivating and looking after it. A healthy garden actually has lots of different plants and insects and birds, and this kind of supports the different species support each other. So if you think about bees pollinating different plants and maybe birds feeding on different insects, it becomes a really self-sustaining balanced system if you've got lots of different species. If you just have like a monocrop, like if you just have, I don't know, just a load of grass or just a load of wheat or just one crop in your garden, one species, it's not so resilient. It's going to need a lot more help. It's going to need a lot more support to survive.
Mhm.
So diversity is good. Diversity really helps us. And what's emerging is that in the West, our range of diversity tends to be less than in countries with more traditional, kind of, I suppose, diets which haven't changed as significantly as our Western diets have, who aren't eating kind of processed foods and they're kind of having access to antibiotics in the way that we are in the West. So the Western gut microbiome tends to have less bacteria and less diverse range of bacteria. But what's also interesting to know about the gut microbiome is another measure is balance. There's a balance between what we would say, kind of use the word good and bad bacteria, but we kind of got to be careful there because bacteria isn't necessarily bad, but there's helpful and less helpful bacteria. So a bit like with the garden, you might have I don't know, some weeds in the corner. That's okay. You know, you can have a few weeds can look nice and they might have an important role in for insects to pollinating them and kind of it's fine to have some, but you don't want to have too many. You want to have a balance. You want to have a balance of different species. You don't necessarily want to have lots of nettles taking a whole section of your garden. You want it to be kind of like lots of different color, lots of different interweaving of different species. And similarly with our gut microbiome as well, there are some bacteria which are really not very helpful. We know some of them like E. coli, and if they get out of balance, we can get really ill. But what's important to know, Donia, for people like me and you living with IBD, is that there are differences in the profile of people with inflammatory bowel disease in terms of our gut microbiome. It tends to be more imbalance between the good and bad bacteria, often patterns where the diversity isn't quite so strong as people who don't have IBD.
Mhm.
So it's useful for us to know that in terms of starting to maybe work to support the health and diversity of our gut microbiome. And basically, it starts with what we eat, definitely. That's a big, it's really, and diversity. Like we're talking about diverse bacteria. Bacteria like to eat different things. These some bacteria love kind of the skins of vegetables. They like high fiber food. So what we want to do is to kind of feed them what they love, and they also love real food. They generally are good bacteria. They want like recognizable food. That's what they've evolved to eat.
Yeah. I was interested, like thinking about the microbiome, that potentially the bacteria can affect the way we think and behave. And really, the biggest question that I really wanted to come to today was about the relationship between gut health and mental health. Because I feel like a lot of us miss that we don't realize how much our guts affect our mood. You were talking about research that shows there's a psychosocial aspect to intestinal disease. Can you explain how serotonin and dopamine is produced in the gut, how this affects our mood, and also repressed emotions? Like a lot of us are living with sort of sense of shame or fear, and does that feed our anxious guts? What is that relationship between gut health and mental health?
Oh, this is something really close to my heart, actually. I think one of the reasons, just to pan out briefly, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is I've worked in education for so many years, and I feel like I've really seen the journey of increased anxiety and depression in young people. I've really seen it. I've had those conversations with teenagers in colleges and talking to parents who are just like, what do I do? What do I do with my young person who can't get out of the house, who is so, so feeling such deep sadness? And I think when I started to look really deeply into the research for the book, I felt like I really needed to explore that aspect of the gut-brain axis. And I think we're still really understanding exactly how intimately interwoven our gut and our brain are, and our gut health connection is. It's so powerful. So we talked about the role of the gut microbiome in terms of our immune system, but actually our gut microbiome synthesizes and creates many, many key hormones in the body, and in particular dopamine and serotonin, which are these feel good chemicals that we really need to feel well and to feel balanced. And the evidence, it appears to be suggesting that when we deprive our gut microbiome of the fuel, the really good food that our gut microbiome needs to be healthy, resilient, diverse, and abundant, our gut microbiome may struggle to be producing some of these chemicals in the abundance and the amount that we need. But I also think it's a complex relationship, because there's a signals that go on through the gut brain axis, and this is through our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve is a really key player in our gut health. And this is this beautiful long wandering nerve that starts, it interweaves in the walls of our intestine, goes through most of the main organs of our body, and then it goes up into our brain. And this is this beautiful highway between the gut and the brain that's constantly communicating. So it's a bi-directional communication. So our gut communicates to our brain, but our brain is also communicating to our gut. And when we go back to fight and flight, it's our brain kind of like, our pituitary gland, it's our pineal gland kind of noticing, okay, is this a stressful situation? I need to communicate back to the gut. Shut
Yeah.
down the gut, the digestive system, not necessary at the moment, switch off or in emergency mode. So this is going on, if you think about it, all day, every day.
Mhm.
But what's particularly interesting is the evidence around the vagus nerve is that this bidirectional relationship is actually going more from the gut to the brain, which is kind of fascinating, because we often see our brain, our head, as the kind of the lead at everything. But actually, it appears that when we're talking about gut instincts and intuition and gut feelings, our language is actually honoring that there is this deeper level of knowing that we
Mhm.
experience in our lives, which is in our gut, and our gut is responding and kind of, I guess, shaping how we feel. And we often, because we're kind of, living neck upwards, we don't
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
connect to that and feel with that. There's an amazing woman called Professor Felice Caffer who's done extensive international research and longitudinal research, and she's been basically tracking the growth in young people eating highly processed junk food, and the increase in anxiety and depression. And so this is really important for us to be aware of. And kind of when we're aware of it, it's not to kind of, there's a risk about feeling guilty or feeling overwhelmed, but actually let's just be kind of like, let's just have a look at what this is pointing to. When we are eating food that isn't nutrient rich, and remember, our brain is a very nutrient hungry organ. It really takes a lot of our calorie and nutrient intake. It takes a lot of our resources when we eat. It really needs to be fed well. But when we're eating food that is empty calories, that aren't really providing nutrients for our body or our brain, then we're not supporting ourselves. We're actually causing stress in our body. We're actually causing a state of stress because our body's kind of like actually nutrient deprived. But now we also know that our gut microbiome has this really important role in creating these hormones and these chemicals. So that is about how do we nurture and protect that diversity and health of our gut microbiome. And it's the opposite of eating junk food, because actually that food is not providing the fiber, the polyphenols, the probiotics, the prebiotics, all the wonderful diversity of nutrients that actually our gut microbiome also wants and needs. So I think it's important to kind of just say, just from a kind of biological level, that actually the way that our diet has shifted in the last 40 years, and there's been a significant change in the last few decades. There's a lot of emerging evidence of that potentially being a key factor in the kind of reporting and increased levels of anxiety and depression.
Yeah,
Huge.
it is, because so many people, they are struggling right now with mental health,
Yeah.
and they have no idea how the food that they are eating is impacting their mental health. And you talking about this and reading your book, I feel so inspired to even take care more about my health, about my body, what I'm eating, and to talk about this with other people. Like,
Yeah.
listen, you can have a healthier life, you can have a healthier mind if you're eating consciously,
Yeah.
and listening to your body and everything that your body needs. You mentioned the prebiotics and probiotics, the three P's that you talk about it in your book. Can you explain a little bit about it?
So probiotics is about increasing the number of bacteria in our gut. So this is actually consuming our bacteria. We're on the cusp of some really exciting change around probiotics, both in terms of our understanding what specific bacteria do in terms of both our mental health and how we feel. So there's an actual branch of treatment called psychobiotics, which is about treating psychological disorders with probiotics. Watch this space. Really, really breaking research going on at the moment around that.
Amazing.
So just to talk about what probiotics are. So probiotics, you can get them in live yogurt, in things like kimchi or sauerkraut. So these are living live bacteria. Caffe's also got probiotics in. So it's basically fermented foods, and this creates natural good bacteria that we can then consume. And the thing is, we want to eat them regularly because they move through our body. We eat them, they move through our body. This kind of constant process. We eat bacteria, we lose them. So we want to kind of be having that quite regularly. Then prebiotics are actually the fertilizers that nourish that bacteria. So we go back to our garden, it's the fertilizer we put on the soil to enrich the microbiome of the soil, to enrich the plants to grow. What our bacteria love is fiber. They love fiber. So we want to be eating fruit and vegetables. We want to be eating grains and legumes. So basically, our bodies love things which are high in fiber. They really digest that, and they really love it. And interestingly, if you think about a lot of the modern Western diet, it's not very high in fiber. Processed food is really lacking in fiber, but most natural foods are actually quite high in fiber. And simple things like oats, apples, bananas, these are all high in what we call prebiotic fiber. And then the third P is polyphenols. And I like to add polyphenols because polyphenols are a wonderful way of creating an antioxidant environment in the gut, and they're really supporting our bacteria to thrive. And polyphenols are, whenever you look at bright colored food, these are rich in different polyphenols. But simple things like tea, black and green tea are high in polyphenols. Berries are super rich, so your blueberries, your strawberries, your raspberries. And also excitingly, because this is also about having balance, dark chocolate is super, super food. It's high in polyphenols as well.
I love dark chocolate.
So important. We've got to have like small pleasures, haven't we? We've got to find the love and the fun in our healthy food diet. We've got to find those exciting things that kind of get our taste buds working up. So yeah, probiotics, prebiotics, and polyphenols are 3 Ps. They're wonderful grounding in good gut health.
You talk about self-compassion massively throughout the book. How is compassion so intrinsically important for our gut health?
Going back to when I shared my story at the start, when I was in hospital, I woke up the morning, after I arrived in hospital, and I just had this sense of something really profound had changed in my life. I had this incredible sense of compassion towards myself that I'd never felt before. And I think it was because I'd seen this, very frail, very vulnerable person, and it was really a tangible feeling. And I think we can be really tough on ourselves. I think there's some amazing research around the level. I think in the UK we're actually quite tough on ourselves. The stiff upper lip, like whole cultural heritage around.
And carry on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and actually being a little bit gentle and a little bit kind of caring and being kind to ourselves is makes change sustainable. Because I think if we come from a place where we're just being really hard and really tough, and I'm going to do this and this, and if I don't, I'm going to beat myself up, and that's not sustainable, is it? It's kind of
No.
like, how long can you keep doing that? But compassion is a lens, isn't it? So it's like bringing a different lens. It's bringing a kind of sense of, I'm on my side. I'm with myself. Like, going back to like literally touching our belly, touching our heart. I'm actually connected. Just kind of arriving in our bodies and, you know, connecting to our heart, connecting to our gut. Just taking a lovely breath and going, how can I care for myself today? How can I care for my gut today? How can I slow down a little bit?
Wow.
That's really
You
beautiful.
know?
I love that we just naturally,
immediately, both of us holding our heart and
yeah,
our guts, and how you feel the love, you
you
feel the
do.
change. It's bringing yourself back to your body and feeling calm. Okay,
Hmm.
yes, I can do this.
Hmm.
Oh, thank you, Cara.
Thank you for bringing
Oh,
a moment of
Oh,
presence to it. It
yeah.
is beautiful because I often found when we would be doing the like sort of visualizations or meditations that when I did close my eyes, I put my hand on my heart or gut, the just emotions start coming to the surface that we don't normally access because I'm working and I check my emails and I check in my phone and I'm doing this. And then you just drop in and it kind of it's you sit with it a little bit
Yeah.
more. It's just it's free, it's accessible to everyone, and it's often the thing in capitalist society where we're all rushing to make money for ourselves. It's often the thing that we miss. So thank you for really bringing that to life in such a
Yeah.
beautiful way. What I'm really inspired about with you, Cara, is that it seems like with your book you integrate spirituality and mental health so beautifully throughout the book. It's not just here's the science and research, off you go. It feels you talk about the energetic body, you talk about mantras and meditations and yoga. So me and Alpha were
Yeah.
like, this is our yeah. And a lot of us, it seems quite mainstream nowadays, thinking about the chakras and the energy centers in our body. We've got 7 main energy centers, but we've obviously got meridians, so we've got loads of energy channels. But I was so interested that you said that the root and solar chakra centers are particularly important for our gut health. What is it about those particular chakras that are potentially so linked to our gut health problems?
I think this has very much come from the intuitive work I've done over the years, working with my gut and working with others. And I think those two energy centers, I think the root chakra is really about nourishing our core being and our core body. And it's kind of the obviously the root of all the other chakras. Our solar plexus chakra is where our guts, our small intestine, our large intestine is kind of based. So I think there's a really strong connection between those two in terms of the trauma that we often hold in our bodies. It can be different for different people, but I sometimes think as well, going back to the piece around anxiety, depression, emotions that we might push down often seem to sit in the belly. I think any emotion that we find difficult or is labeled as negative, our anger can get pushed down, turned inward, held in the gut. I think the idea of having a fire in our belly, but not maybe being able to express it, being able to kind of like not being okay to have those emotions. So I have certainly found working both with myself over many years on my healing journey, but working with others as well, that breathing in, doing some work around those energy centers has subtle but really powerful effects over time. It seems to kind of shift or unlock things. And it was interesting hearing you talk, Donia, about, going through your detox at the moment and the kind of relationship with food. And food is interesting. It can be such a distraction. We can use food, can't we, to kind of escape emotions. And so I think there's something there around the connection between our whole digestive system and its role in processing our emotions
Mhm.
and also processing what we eat.
I wondered with you, Elfa, as well, because you're an energy worker and healer. Have you found like a lot of people with gut health problems have come to you? Actually, it's
Yes,
quite interesting.
yes, absolutely. And I think that what I've been feeling recently and making these connections recently is like people complaining about their digestive system and really anxious, really, really anxious. That's what we talked before about this connection between the gut
Yeah.
and the mind. So definitely.
How much is energy work so relevant to releasing some of this trauma?
Yeah, like I think that people like when they come for a chakra balancing, for example, and you
Mm.
feel like this imbalance in the root chakra, they feel that people normally they're not grounded at all, and when they are not grounded, they are not nourishing themselves. They don't
Mm,
have this connection
Cycle.
of it's the cycle. Like
Yeah.
you're not eating well, you're not nurturing yourself, so you're not grounded, and then your root is absolutely
Yes.
unbalanced, and then your entire chakra system is unbalanced.
Because you said yesterday something about the solar is connected to our personal
Our
power.
personal power, yes.
This is so interesting because I can imagine, like, I've definitely felt a sense of feeling very disempowered with having a health condition. And I can imagine, like, for a lot of people with IBS and bowel conditions, that the solar of that feeling of personal power almost becomes a bit diminished.
Mm,
So it's just interesting. I didn't realize that was personal power was so linked to the solar
mm,
plexus. I'm just so interested in the fact that you've integrated this energy work because I think sometimes in the West we think pill or surgery and it's so
mm,
yeah,
materialistic and that's the
yeah,
only way of
yeah,
healing. And it almost feels like that actually these illnesses often manifest from the energetic body.
yeah.
So if
mm,
imbalance in the energetic body, how have we then manifested dis-ease in the body through that? So I just, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a deep connection between the two. It's like the body can be unbalanced and affecting the energetic field,
Yes.
and the opposite, your energetic field is unbalanced, and then it's going to affect your body.
Yeah.
So it's the cycle, and I think the more than we talk about it, the more we're going to try to, okay, I have to understand what's going on with my body, what's going on with
Yeah.
my health.
And Elfa and I were really excited,
Really
Cara,
passionate
by
about this.
your gut love dance. We like one of my favourite things in the book.
Absolutely.
It's
Genius.
It's so genius. And we both love dance and love music.
Yeah.
I'm a beginner DJ as well. And I saw this and I was like, this is my kind of healing. You said that our bodies hold memories in our muscles and movement goes deeper than words. And in the gut love dance, you suggest breathe into your fear, your frustration, your rage, your anxiety, give them shape. And I absolutely loved it. Can you describe your inspiration behind the gut love dance?
Yeah, it was actually the first time I started to experiment with it. I'd gone in for a hospital checkup. And I remember really clearly being in my hospital gown in the toilet, and it was like a private moment. And I just started to move. I just started to like almost kind of go into stance, like stance of strength. I felt really vulnerable and I needed to be strong and I needed to connect with my body. And I was like, and I knew that it was like help, it was supporting me. It was helping me to connect really deeply, heart, gut connection, really powerfully. Movement is healing. Movement is a really important part of this. You know, we can get really talk about food and we can talk about diet, and that has a role. But movement and physical connection and emotional connection with ourselves is a big part of that holistic aspect of healing. I think there's something about empowerment, like that was felt really important. Inspiration, empowerment, strength, courage. I love the New Zealand haka, you know, this beautiful dance that happens like the warriors, like at the start of the rugby match. I was watching that and I was kind of connecting with that when I was writing and I was trying to describe the movements. It was kind of like that real sense of something inward, that inward strength, but also that sense of like display and power. It was like really kind of like I was channeling that. I was looking at women doing the haka because there is actually a heritage of women having the haka dance as well. It's a ceremonial process.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful process. And I think ceremony and ritual can be really supportive when we're healing. It can support us to stop, to be more aware, to be more present. I think just to mention briefly, in compassion, there is a yin yang of self compassion. I don't know if you know the work of Kristen Neff. So the yin of self compassion is this idea of being tender and gentle and kind and soft and yielding. But the yang of self-compassion is actually about being strong. It's advocating for ourselves. It's
Yes.
articulating. It's setting boundaries. It's being like no,
Yes.
and it's
Oh,
clarity.
great.
So it's this lovely part of the yin yang, and I felt like the dance is the yang of self-compassion. It's being really powerful, but it's also kind of leaning into your strength and being, I'm going to care for myself.
Yes.
Sometimes we want to tap into the fierce energy, and I love that you describe it as this sort of warrior stance and the
Yes.
strength,
Strong.
Yeah.
empowerment. I listened to your audio. You encourage belly breathing and describe a belly metta bhavana practice from the Theravada Buddhist tradition,
Yeah.
which is about directing loving kindness towards ourselves. And I wondered whether you might be open to guiding us through one for the end of the episode.
This is so important that it doesn't all talking in our head, but actually it's experiential in our body and our belly. So yeah, I would love to. So I would just encourage you to sit up if you can, because it's lovely just to open the front of the body and open the area of the belly. So just having the shoulders nice and back, just so they're open and just feeling really stable in your body and wherever you're sitting. It's great to have your feet flat on the floor if you can. To deepen it, if you put one hand, just one palm on your heart and one palm on your belly, that can really just connect you to your breath. And I'm just going to encourage you just to take a lovely deep breath into that lower hand. So when you're breathing in, you're feeling that lower palm move out. And as you exhale, imagine just sighing. Imagine that you're misting a mirror with your breath. And making that sigh can really help just to release tension in the body and the belly. So another lovely deep breath in together. sighing outwardly. So now that we've connected with our beautiful belly, we're just going to send it some loving kindness. So the simple refrain that you can say quietly to yourself is, as you continue to breathe, may my belly be well. May my belly be calm. May my belly be healed. And it's finding words that really resonate with you. May my belly be whole. May my belly be at peace. And as you say the refrain, the words quietly to yourself, to your belly, taking that lovely deep breath just gently into that lower part of your belly. May my belly be healed. May my belly be calm. And now to complete, send love and healing to your belly. Thank it for the work it does for you each day. Thank all those beautiful bacteria in your gut microbiome for all the ways that they support you and nourish you each day. And smile to yourself and to your belly. And when you're ready, you can come back into the room.
I think it's so beautiful that we could end with gratitude. I can't thank you enough, Cara.
Yes, oh,
We've honestly
thank
been
you.
so
Yeah.
excited to speak to you, and it's just been a blessing. It's so
Yes.
enjoyable, and I've learned so much. And
Yes.
love your book. Thank you.
Really, I feel really inspired by you. Really, really inspired. Thank you so much.
What an absolute joy to meet with you both and to have a space this morning to talk all things gut health. I mean, it's absolutely my passion, and how lovely to have two people who are also doing the work in the world and kind of spreading the message of compassion and care, and finding moments just to be present to ourselves. So thank you both, Alpha and Dunya. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you enjoyed that episode with the incredible Cara Wheatley McGrain and my gorgeous, gorgeous friend Elfa. To find out more about Cara's work, how you can purchase her book and her upcoming retreat, please check out the links in the description, where you'll also be able to find out more about Elfa's healing and coaching work. Stay tuned for more episodes on spirituality, well-being and creativity. And now I'm so excited to play you out to a full belly Metta Bhavana practice by Cara Wheatley McGrain with the incredible music accompaniment of Starseed Soul. Thank you for listening.
The belly Metta Bhavana practice is designed to shine a light on your hidden gut organs. To give them a voice, they become real places in your inner body that deserve to be treated with mindful attention and care. This ancient practice will support you in stretching and developing your self-love muscle. And once this is strengthened, you'll find this naturally expands outwardly into the rest of your life. The Metta Bhavana practice is an ancient Theravada Buddhist tradition that actually supports your development of loving kindness, firstly by directing it towards yourself, and then outwardly towards others. So in this case, we're going to love your gut, your dear, precious gut microbiome. In the Metta Bhavana practice, we focus on the traditional refrain, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be safe. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be safe. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be safe. To complete this practice, it's really useful to find a quiet space, a comfortable position to sit in, and to breathe deeply into your belly. This supports you to become grounded and centered in your belly. You can also connect to your head, heart, and hara. And by taking the breath deeply into the hara, into your gut, into the core of your being, you will naturally notice yourself start to relax and become more centered in the core of your being. In our belly Metta Bhavana practice, we will be focusing on our gut and developing a mantra to support us to feel healed and whole. May my belly be well, may it be healed, may it be safe. May my belly be gently nourished by this meal. May my belly be well, may it be healed, may it be safe. May my bloated belly be soothed, may it be blessed. May my belly be well, may it be healed, may it be safe. May my colon be calm, may my colon be healed, may my colon be whole. May my belly be well, may it be healed, may it be safe. May I feel peace, may I feel strong, may I feel whole. May my belly be well, may it be healed, may it be safe. May I learn to listen and love my gut. May my belly be well, may it be healed, may it be safe. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be safe. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be safe. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be safe. May my belly be well, may it be healed, may it be safe. May my body be well, may my body be healed, may my body be safe. May my body be well, may my body be healed, may my body be safe.